In the quiet town of Alderheim, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. The mornings began with the soft ringing of church bells, and the evenings ended with empty streets and dim lights glowing behind curtains. People trusted each other here. Doors were rarely locked, and strangers were noticed immediately. In the center of this peaceful town lived Marthe Erbelding. She was known as a gentle and dependable woman, always dressed in simple clothes, with her hair neatly tied back. After losing her husband years ago, Marthe had dedicated her life to caring for others. She worked as a private caretaker, helping elderly residents who could no longer take care of themselves. Families praised her endlessly. "She's a blessing," one neighbor once said. "We don't know what we'd do without her." Marthe cooked meals, cleaned homes, and sat patiently beside her patients, often holding their hands in silence. She spoke softly, never raised her voice, and always seemed calm, even in difficult situations. To many, she was more than a caretaker. She was comfort. But behind this kindness, something felt off. Over the past few years, a quiet pattern had formed. The elderly people under Marthe's care rarely lived long. Some passed away within weeks, others lasted a few months. Each death was explained as natural, expected, unavoidable. After all, they were old. Still, the frequency was unusual. A few townspeople noticed it. They whispered about it in low voices, careful not to sound accusing. But doubt never lasted long. Marthe's reputation was too strong, her demeanor too sincere. No one wanted to believe anything was wrong. Because in a town built on trust, suspicion felt like betrayal. And Marthe Erbelding was the last person anyone would ever suspect. Dr. Elias Werner had spent more than 2 decades serving the people of Alderheim. He was a careful and experienced physician, known for his attention to detail and calm judgment. Nothing escaped his notice, or so he believed. At first, he didn't think much about the deaths connected to Marthe Erbelding. Most of her patients were elderly and fragile. Their passing, while sad, was not unexpected. But over time, a pattern began to form in his mind. It wasn't just that they were dying, it was how they were dying. Many of Marthe's patients showed similar symptoms in their final days. They became suddenly weak, confused, and strangely restless. Some complained of a tightness in their chest, while others struggled to breathe. What troubled Dr. Werner most was the speed of it all. These declines were too sudden. Patients who had been stable during their last checkups would collapse within hours. It didn't match the natural course of aging or common illnesses he had treated for years. One evening, unable to ignore his doubts any longer, Dr. Werner sat alone in his office and began reviewing old medical records. File after file told the same story, different names, same endings. A quiet unease settled over him. He considered reporting it immediately, but there was a problem. There was no direct evidence, no test results, no witnesses, only a feeling and a pattern that could still be dismissed as coincidence. Still, Dr. Werner trusted his instincts. When a new patient, Greta Holm, was assigned to Marthe's care, he made a decision. Greta was not critically ill. In fact, she was relatively healthy for her age. If anything unusual happened to her, it wouldn't be easy to explain. For the first time, Dr. Werner began to watch Marthe closely, and what he would soon discover would change everything. Greta Holm had always been known as one of the strongest women in Alderheim. Even in her old age, she remained active, alert, and full of life. She enjoyed long walks, remembered every detail of her past, and rarely needed assistance. When her family hired Marthe Erbelding, it was only for light support, cooking, cleaning, and occasional company. For weeks, everything seemed perfectly normal. Marthe carried out her duties as expected. Greta appeared healthy, cheerful, and unchanged. Dr. Elias Werner checked on her regularly, finding no signs of illness. For a moment, he began to doubt his own suspicions. Perhaps he had been wrong. But then came the night that shattered everything. Late one evening, Greta suddenly complained of severe dizziness. Her hands trembled and she struggled to stand. Within minutes, her condition worsened. She clutched her chest, gasping for air, her voice weak and confused. Marthe was the one who called for help. When Dr. Werner arrived, he immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. His symptoms were too intense, too sudden. This wasn't a natural decline. It was a rapid collapse. He didn't hesitate. Greta was rushed to the hospital without delay. Doctors worked quickly, running urgent tests to determine the cause. Time felt painfully slow as everyone waited for answers. Then the results came in. There was a foreign substance in her bloodstream, a toxin. Silence filled the room as the reality sank in. This was no illness. This was deliberate. Dr. Werner felt a chill run down his spine. His fears had been right all along. And now there was only one question left. Who had done this? All eyes slowly turned toward one name. Marthe Erbelding. The discovery of poison in Greta Holm's bloodstream changed everything. What had once been quiet suspicion was now a full investigation. The police moved quickly, knowing that if their fears were true, more lives could be at risk. Marthe Erbelding was brought in for questioning. She appeared calm, just as she always did. Her voice was steady, her expression unreadable. She answered every question politely, never showing fear or anger. To the officers, it felt unsettling. Most people in her position would panic. Marthe did not. While she was being questioned, a search team was sent to her home. At first glance, the small house seemed ordinary. Everything was clean and organized. The kitchen shelves were neatly arranged, and her medical supplies were stored carefully, just as expected from a professional caretaker. But then something unusual was found. Inside a locked drawer in her bedroom, officers discovered several small glass bottles. Each one contained a clear liquid. There were no proper medical labels, only small handwritten marks that made little sense. The bottles were immediately sent for testing. The results confirmed the worst. They contained toxic substances, rare, difficult to detect, and deadly in small amounts. Even chilling, the chemical traces matched what had been found in Greta's blood. The investigation deepened. Authorities began reviewing Marthe's past employment. Records showed she had worked in several towns before arriving in Alderheim. In each place, there had been similar cases, elderly patients dying suddenly under her care, with no clear explanation. It was no longer coincidence. It was a pattern stretching back years. When confronted with the evidence, Marthe remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she began to speak. When Marthe Erbelding finally spoke, The room fell completely silent. The investigators expected denial, fear, or confusion. Instead, they were met with something far more unsettling: acceptance. "I didn't hurt them," she said calmly. "I helped them." Her voice carried no emotion, no regret. It was as if she truly believed what she was saying. Marthe went on to describe everything in detail. She explained how she would add small amounts of poison to her patients' food or medicine over time, never enough to raise suspicion immediately, but enough to weaken them slowly. She watched their bodies fail, step by step, always staying by their side as they grew worse. To her, it was a form of care. She claimed she was ending their suffering, giving them a peaceful release from old age and illness. But as investigators listened, it became clear that her actions were not driven by mercy alone. There was control in her words. She spoke about the timing, the precision, the way she decided when it would end. It wasn't just about helping. It was about choosing who lived and who died. Doctors were brought in to evaluate her mental condition. Many expected to find signs of severe illness or instability, but the results were chilling. Marthe was fully aware of her actions. She understood right from wrong. She knew the consequences, and yet she showed no remorse. The court trial that followed shocked the entire country. Families of the victims came forward, sharing their grief and disbelief. The woman they had trusted had been quietly taking lives. In the end, Marthe Erbelding was sentenced to life in prison. But even behind bars, one question continued to haunt everyone. Was she ever truly sorry, or simply finished? If this case left you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust, then you're not alone. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones we fear, but the ones we never suspect. If you want more chilling true crime stories that stay with you long after they end, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might be even darker.